Let's start with the COVID lockdown and the mask mandate and the reinforcement that you instituted back in November. A lot of people were thinking that this was kind of you overstepping your bounds when it comes to being a mayor of a city, enforcing people, asking businesses to call police, asking people to turn in businesses. How has it gone so far? And do you feel that you were overstepping your bounds?
So, when I came into office a year ago, the last thing on my mind was having to deal with a pandemic. And we were called on by the state at the local level to make decisions. And I learned in all of this that I would take steps to protect public health as needed, because it's about keeping people safe in our community to ensure that we have a strong economy in the long run. And we led as a city in instituting first restaurant and bar closures, then partnering with the governor during his own stay home order, and then opening our city in smart ways and by requiring that people wear masks so we can keep our businesses open. Okay. In the fall, we instituted an enforcement program because what we were seeing was that after so many months, usage was slipping, and the majority of residents were calling on us to do something to protect public health again. So rather than shutting businesses down, we came up with a new way to ensure, in partnership with those businesses, that if they were, seeking to be employers and businesses that protect public health, we would stand by them and help them enforce the orders. And it's made a difference in the cases that we've seen in our city.
Would you say you've seen a lot of people kind of making phone calls to the city, pointing out infractions?
The numbers weren't nearly as high as we thought that they might be. But what we saw was that in making a new way of enforcing an existing order, it reminded everybody that there was an order in place, and we saw increased usage of masks again, which helped us keep businesses open, which has always been our goal.
Okay, so yeah, pretty low number looking at some of those. And nobody has had their license suspended. It hasn't even gotten that close, right?
You know what, just kind of not for filming right now.
Yeah.
I haven't looked at the stats this week. As
okay.
far as I know, there have been no suspensions, but Seth could follow up with stats if you wanted to read them into the story.
Yeah, I got those today. I was just looking at them. So just to confirm, yeah, there have, I think, 4 citations, 1 arrest, and no businesses have had their license pulled or anything like that, which is great.
What we knew going into this, or what we believed to be true going into this, and what we saw was that across this city, people are committed to protecting public health and to keeping our businesses open. And so businesses were really trying hard to do what they knew they needed to do. And so in partnership with them, we've made it easier to do so.
It's been difficult to kind of hear from you during this pandemic year, but we heard from you after your first 100 days, your first State of the City back in September. Here we are wrapping up your first full year in office. What do you have to say after the first year?
Well, I'll say this. This is not the year that we imagined last January when I was sworn in. And it was just last week that we celebrated, or marked, I should say, we did not celebrate, but marked the 1-year anniversary of my swearing in. But despite the obstacles that this community has faced in this last year, my belief that I had that night when I was being sworn in, that we needed to try new ways and with new urgency to address affordable housing, that we must create regional partnerships to tackle big issues like transportation, and that we've got to look at how we create more opportunity for prosperity for our residents is more important today than it was a year ago. And so while this first year has been different, I've talked to people throughout the year this way, rather than in library rooms and in parks, but we've continued to have monthly listening sessions. I continue to have time on my schedule to call constituents back, to send them emails. We've addressed public health with the tools that we have available and stayed focused on the changes that we've got to deliver for this community as we continue to grow.
Of those things you just mentioned that you sought to accomplish in your first year, or at least to address in your first year, has any one of those been more difficult than you anticipated?
So I would say that 2 things on that. We knew that there was an urgency around affordable housing, and I'm so proud of the work that we've been able to do this year to increase the tools we have in our toolbox to address affordability and to provide services to those experiencing homelessness to move them into shelter and into home. It's been harder to work on transportation issues because we need to grow a regional system, but there's a lot of questions right now that the public has about getting on the bus. So that's been harder. But instead, we reimagined how we address mobility at this point. And we launched the Canal Pathway Plan. Just like the Greenbelt 50 years ago started with a plan, we want to make a plan for how we acquire easements along canals so people can move from the farmlands all the way to the foothills. And it's not only important to get to work in a different way, but we learned in this pandemic how important it is to have more open space available to people. So I'd say transportation's been a little more challenging than we might have expected. And then, of course, civic engagement and engaging with the public has been more difficult than expected. But what's been incredible about that is it's forced us to try new things. And in many ways, I feel like it's opened the doors, proverbial doors of City Hall, more people, because our residents can engage with me and with our council, with other commissions in new ways from their home.
Yeah, they don't have to show up in person, get a babysitter or whatever. They can just kind of log in from home, which is a great way to look at it.
And I'll never forget the first time I saw a mom. It was her turn to testify on a matter at a city council meeting. And she turns on her camera when we call her name, and she's got a toddler on her hip. She's standing in a park, and she's got, another child playing on a playground. It was summer, so it was still light out. And that to me showed me like the power of trying new things and how important it was to be forced to do it. Because a year ago, we would have said this was not possible to engage the public in meaningful ways in this way. But that made it possible for that mom to participate while at the same time not having to leave her family behind.
Yeah, that's pretty incredible, and a good way to look at it, as opposed to, we can't do something, but here we can do something differently. I want to talk about, go back to the COVID thing a little bit, because there has been talk with the shutdowns and a lot of people staying away from gathering downtown where a lot of people used to, that there are some businesses that are basically going to pull up their stakes and kind of move out of downtown. There's a lot of talk about that. What have you heard about that? And I understand there were some grants available. How is that program working?
Sure. I mean, that's been a real impact of this pandemic, is that businesses are struggling and some have closed. And it's terrible news to hear, because not only is it a business that many of us love, but most importantly, the impacts it has on our residents and those of that business employees. We have done everything we can with the limited tools and dollars that we have to come up with ways to support businesses. And as you referenced, our small grant program made $1.5 million available to small businesses. We received applications in excess of that, have processed those applications, and are dispersing the money. And it's my hope that if there's an additional stimulus, if more money comes to states or cities, that we can see something like this happen again to support those businesses in our community.
Nice. Okay. Pivoting then to affordable housing. The Housing Land Trust, you mentioned that in your State of the City address. How is that going? How far is it advanced? And what's the latest with creating affordable housing or maintaining it, building other places, and making it more affordable for those people that want to stay in the city of Boise?
Sure. The urgency around affordable housing was real a year ago, and it continues to be real and more urgent today. We know that a city can't do it all, and that a city needs lots of tools. And so the Housing Land Trust is one of those tools that I've been so excited to implement, where we look at the land that the city has, where we acquire land where we can, and then put it out to bid for projects that would create neighborhoods for people at all different income levels. A test case of that occurred at Franklin and Orchard up on the bench, where we'll have about 200 new homes that are affordable to Boiseans being built. And we have other land that we intend to put out for proposals in the future. We've taken steps also to, there's a housing bonus ordinance that the city council is reviewing. Again, another tool that would allow the city to negotiate with developers for a set number of units at different prices in exchange for some things that would make the project better for them. We want to have as many tools as we can so that unit by unit, we can pick off houses that are, or homes that are affordable for the public, because as we continue to grow and our market continues to increase, it becomes harder and harder for people to find the homes at Boise budgets that they need.
Are you finding it difficult to even find pieces of land and developers to kind of get involved in this program?
So we put out RFPs when we're ready, and the Franklin and Orchard project was a success. Be built soon. We'll do the same with other parcels in this coming year next. So it's a program in its infancy that we're seeing has power to work as one of many things that we need to do as a city to address affordability.
Yeah. The other thing you talked about in your State of the City address was climate change, clean energy, your goal to make Boise completely carbon neutral by 2035. What are the advancements been like toward that goal?
So I look at climate change as requiring us to think of it as an opportunity. It's a dire, dire crisis, but out of that crisis will come opportunities. And I want Boise to be positioned as a leader so that our residents can be more certain to have prosperity in the long run. So part of that is to recognize that in a transition to clean energy, there's opportunities for new technologies. We've invested in the beginning of an incubator that would partner with the university, the Department of Energy, businesses, Trailhead even, to look at energy innovations to help us meet our clean electricity goals. And then as we started the Climate Action Division here at the city, we've said we're going to develop a climate roadmap to get our municipal government to carbon neutral by 2035 and to take the learnings from that to help the whole city get there. And that matters to me because as power becomes more expensive, as the impact of climate on our water, our farms, our energy, our community as a whole starts to weigh true, our residents will feel that financially and from a health perspective. And so as a city, I believe it's on us to think now about how we set ourselves up to not only save money month to month in our power bills in the long run, but to create jobs of the future that'll lead to prosperity for more people.
So this isn't just a philosophical thing for you.
Oh no, this to me, it is not a philosophical thing. I believe deeply that this is about people. It's about protecting the people of this community and the place that we love. And if we think about what the future looks like and we start to take steps now to prepare for that, it's our people that will be more prosperous.
What do you say to the critics though who scoff and say gas-free cars downtown Boise by 2035 or even before that? I mean, that's an impossibility. What do you say to them?
Well, as a city government, we are working on electrifying our fleet. We just opened a 100% electric building. It's our police substation. And we as a municipal government, I believe, have a responsibility to lead, to learn how to reach these goals as a government so that we can save our residents money and then use that learning to ensure that the benefits expand beyond the city government itself to the residents in their daily lives.
Okay. When you first got in, you set up these transition teams and you had 6 of them and you wanted to hear from them. What are your recommendations? What can we do to push this city into the future? Everything from clean energy, as we talked about, transportation, we talked about, to equality in the city. Has there anything come out of those recommendations that you think either has risen to the top or has the best possibility of actually being implemented in the city?
Sure, I appreciate that question. There were 6 committees, I think 72 residents that volunteered their time. And of course, that was before COVID. And so there were a lot of steps recommended for my first 100 days, 200 days. What we learned from those reports was all the things that citizens believed that we needed to do to meet our goals of being a city for everyone. And you've seen sprinkled throughout our work this year some of the recommendations from working on childcare to ensure that employees in this community have access to childcare so that they can access opportunity. I'm looking at how the canal pathways suggestion came out of the transition subcommittee on transportation. Here at the city, we are increasing access to our commissions. We're looking at ensuring that the commissions and our employees reflect the community, and we're doing diversity, equity, and inclusion work here at the city. Affordable housing committees really encouraged me to stick true to my goals of a bonus ordinance, a land trust for houses. And so we've taken pieces of those reports and woven them into the work that we're doing, recognizing we couldn't do it all before. And there are so many needs and pressures financially now, given COVID.
Okay. The last thing, and this kind of springboards off of that, because one of your transition teams was based on that equitable transition team. And there were a lot of critics who saw kind of these ideas that came through with these recommendations. But that kind of also ties into the police force and Boise PD. You've hired a new police chief. There's this talk of this modernizing of the police force. What does that mean to you?
Sure. So the new police chief joined us in July, and I have to say he's truly a partner in ensuring that our community remains safe, and I appreciate the service of the members of the department. A modernized police force for this community will reflect our growing needs. We've put data online so that the public can see the types of calls that we receive and the services we provide. And that helps us as policymakers decide what investments we need to make to meet the needs of the community. We're looking at training. We're looking at how we recruit members of the force. And we're not doing that just in the police department. This is really something that we're looking at citywide to ensure that all of our employees come to this space with an eye towards service and reflective of the community in which we live.
Did you take anything away from the demonstrations this summer with BLM and the other side of that, backing the blue? Did you take anything away from that when it comes to how you approach Boise PD?
What I took away from the demonstrations this summer, the demonstrations at my home, the demonstrations we've seen around the country, is the importance that we all place on the freedom of speech and assembly, that I myself place on that. The passion that people bring to their side of the issue, but the importance of making sure that these protests are held safely and that violence is prevented, because that's a step too far.
But you heard what they were saying, right? You listened to kind of everything that they said.
I heard on a weekly basis what residents from this community and from places near and far had to say about the topics. And we talked about them as a council because we've been called on to address really tough topics last year, and I expect in the coming year. And while we won't always agree, all of us, understanding where people are coming from, the passion that they hold for a topic, and then using that as I think about how to steer our city forward is incredibly important to me.
How do you feel about putting your first year behind you?
I can't believe it's been a year. I want to say this year was incredibly difficult for all of us. It called on us to really be better or bigger than we knew that we could be. It called on us to think about how our actions impact the lives and actions of others, and to stay steady throughout all of the crises that we were called on to face. I wish that we could go back and stop the pandemic, stop the loss of life, stop the loss of businesses and livelihoods, but we can't. And I know that we will come out stronger for this in the long run. And I'm incredibly grateful to the people of Boise for giving me the opportunity to be a part of this and to work in partnership with all of you to address the real needs that we have in this community as we move through these unprecedented, tough times.